My name is Olivia Chin, and for the last 15 years, I've worn the title of family disappointment, not because I failed, but because I refused to follow the script my parents wrote for me. Another family dinner, another performance, another reminder that I'm the black sheep. I smoothed the fabric of my simple black dress as I approached my parents' mansion, the same house I quietly helped pay off, not that they'd ever know. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, perfectly composed in designer couture, eyes already scanning for flaws. "Olivia, you're late, everyone's waiting," she said, her tone sharp as ever. "And that dress, couldn't you have chosen something more suitable?" I glanced down, minimalist, elegant, and worth more than her entire outfit, but it didn't shout wealth the way she liked. "Good evening to you too, Mom." Inside, the dining room buzzed with familiar faces. My brother Michael, the family favorite, held court at the head of the table where Dad used to sit, flashing a new Rolex like a badge of honor. His wife Jessica clung to his every word, as usual. My sister Diana lounged nearby, fresh off her latest luxury escape, financed, of course, by our parents. "Well, look who finally decided to join us," Michael said with a smirk, "still driving that old Toyota, Liv." If only he knew, that Toyota was my decoy. The rest of my car collection, rare, pristine, and insured for millions, sat tucked away in a private garage across town. "Some of us have to earn our keep," I said, slipping into my usual seat, at the far end of the table, exiled from the circle of success. Mom chimed in, resting a manicured hand on Michael's shoulder. "Managing a small consulting firm isn't quite what we'd call a real career, not like your brother's role at Morgan Stanley." I took a sip of water, suppressing a smile. Michael's executive position was actually mid-tier management. I knew because my firm had just reviewed Morgan Stanley during a due diligence sweep for a potential merger. Diana leaned forward, flashing a diamond bracelet. "You know, if you're ready to get serious, Michael could probably get you in at the bank, something with structure and credibility." "I'm doing just fine, thanks." Mom scoffed as she began serving appetizers. "You're 35, unmarried, no children, running a tiny operation from a rented office downtown. That's not fine, Olivia, that's pitiful." Dad, silent until now, cleared his throat. "We didn't send you to Harvard so you could waste your life on a vanity project." I nearly laughed. They hadn't paid a cent. I'd worked through college, launched my company from scratch, and turned it into a powerhouse. Phoenix Consulting now influenced markets across 3 continents. But to them, I was still Olivia, stubborn, strange Olivia with her little business and no real accomplishments. "Still a nobody," Mom said, shaking her head as she took her seat. "While your siblings are building legacies, you're just here." Then my phone rang. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but I'd been waiting for this call. I glanced at the screen. Sarah Martinez, my head of operations. "Excuse me, I need to take this." "Now?" Mom hissed. "During dinner?" I stepped away, answering. Sarah's voice came through, crisp and composed. "MS. Chin, the Anderson Tech deal is ready, 50 million. We'll need your signature within the hour to finalize the acquisition for the Asian markets." I caught the way the room hushed. Dad actually coughed into his wine. "Send it to my secure inbox," I said calmly. "I'll sign now." I opened my laptop, the one they assumed I used for balancing client invoices. A few clicks later, my digital signature sealed the deal. Phoenix Consulting now owned one of Southeast Asia's largest tech firms. Silence. I closed the laptop, returned to my seat, and picked up my fork like nothing had happened. "Now," I said, eyes on my mother, "what were we saying about wasting potential?" I could feel their eyes on me, struggling to compute what they'd just witnessed. Mom's fork slipped from her fingers, clattering against fine china. Michael's smug expression had curdled into confused silence. "Olivia," Dad said finally, his voice uncertain, "what was that call about?" I closed my laptop with a soft, deliberate click. "Just business, Dad, nothing for you to worry about." I smiled gently, picking up my fork. "Now, shall we continue with dinner?" Silence fell like a thunderclap. For the first time in 15 years, no one at this table had anything left to say about my life choices. But this was only the beginning. They had no idea what came next. Dinner resumed in a haze of awkward clinks and stolen glances. The tension stretched so tight it buzzed in the air like a taut wire. Eventually, Mom, never one to let silence win, broke. 50 million, she said lightly, feigning nonchalance. There must be a mistake. Your little firm couldn't possibly. Actually, Michael cut in, brow furrowed. I've heard rumors. Some aggressive firm called Phoenix something, been making major moves in Asia. He trailed off, turning to me with a look I hadn't seen before, curiosity, maybe even respect. Phoenix Consulting Group, I said, taking a sip of wine. Diana nearly dropped her phone. No way, that's not your company. Phoenix is huge. They just bought that software giant in Singapore for, like, $2 billion. 2.4, I corrected softly. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Dad's hand shook as he set down his glass. You're lying, Mom said, her voice suddenly sharp. You're just trying to impress us. The CEO of Phoenix is some genius named Olivia Phoenix. I finished for her. I changed my last name 10 years ago, after you told me I was disgracing the family name by leaving Morgan Stanley to start something of my own. Michael looked like he'd seen a ghost. But, that's impossible. Phoenix Consulting is valued at $37 billion, I continued calmly. With the Anderson Tech acquisition, we'll cross 40 by next week. The silence was complete now, stunned and suffocating. My phone buzzed again, a news alert. Phoenix Consulting Group acquires Anderson Tech in surprise move. Stock surges 28%. I turned the screen toward them. Mom's hands flew to her mouth. Dad paled. Why didn't you tell us? Diana whispered. I looked around the table, locking eyes with each of them. Would it have made a difference? For 15 years, none of you asked. You never cared about my work, only that it didn't look like Michael's or fit neatly into your definition of success. Mom sputtered, but the office downtown, it's so small. I chuckled softly. That's where I meet local clients. Phoenix HQ occupies the top 10 floors of the glass tower downtown. You know, the one Dad always points to as a symbol of real success. Michael shoved his chair back. This is insane. I work in finance. I'd know if my own sister ran Phoenix. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling. According to the org chart we reviewed last week, you're a level 3 manager in the domestic retail division, hardly the executive title you've been claiming. His face went red. You've been spying on me? No, Michael, we're about to acquire Morgan Stanley's Asian wing. Your department came up in the audit, page 247, I believe. Jessica, his wife, had gone stiff. Clearly, she believed every inflated word. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. The Anderson Tech bid. That was you? You outbid your own father? Yes, I said simply. It wasn't personal, it was business. Phoenix has a better integration plan. Mom stood suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. Well, this changes everything. Olivia, darling, we should plan a proper celebration. I'll call the country club. No. The word cut through the room like a blade. I haven't changed. I'm still the same daughter you dismissed an hour ago. The only difference is now you've realized the woman you treated like a failure was quietly building an empire. I rose, smoothing out the dress Mom had deemed inappropriate, custom-made, and worth more than her car. Thank you for dinner, I said, calm and clear. And then I walked out. I had an early morning ahead. We were closing another acquisition. Wait, Diana called, her voice strained with urgency. My startup idea, maybe we could talk about. Submit it through the proper channels, I said, lifting my bag over my shoulder. Phoenix has a very strict vetting process for founders, though fair warning, we typically favor candidates with actual business experience. As I moved toward the door, Dad followed, his tone suddenly soft. Olivia, sweetheart, let's not be hasty. We're family. Maybe we could sit down, discuss some investment opportunities. I turned, and they were all there, the entire family, crowded into the foyer. Their faces were a storm of shock, regret, and thinly veiled desperation. You know what's funny? I said, resting my hand on the doorknob. All those years you thought I was barely scraping by, I was actually helping you. They stared, frozen. The anonymous buyer who kept this house out of foreclosure 3 years ago, that was me. The miracle that kept Michael on during the Morgan Stanley layoffs, me again. The stock tip that let Diana buy her condo, you're welcome. Their faces crumbled as the truth cracked open everything they thought they knew. I did it because, believe it or not, you're still my family. But I never needed your approval, and I certainly don't now. Mom stepped forward, eyes brimming. Olivia, please. I have another dinner tomorrow, I said, adjusting the strap of my bag. Warren Buffett's requested a meeting. Apparently, he respects what I've built. But honestly, I don't care what impresses you anymore. I opened the door, paused. Oh, and Michael? I glanced back. The Morgan Stanley acquisition closes next week. Might want to polish that resume. Phoenix has very high standards for middle management. Then I stepped out and shut the door behind me with a quiet, satisfying click. Outside, I walked toward my old Toyota, a modest disguise for what was, in truth, a custom-armored luxury vehicle. Inside, chaos had erupted, Mom's sobs, Dad barking orders into the phone, Diana shrieking in confusion. But their noise no longer reached me. For 15 years, I was their shame, quietly building $1 billion empire beneath their noses. Now they finally knew. The best part? I didn't need their recognition, I never had. My phone buzzed, Sarah, my head of operations, with updates for the morning's meetings. I smiled as I started the engine. The family failure had an empire to run. The next morning, the headlines screamed across every screen. Phoenix strikes again, Anderson Tech acquisition shocks market. My inbox was flooded, hundreds of missed calls, messages, voicemails, cousins pitching half-baked business ideas, uncles sniffing around for investments, distant relatives claiming they'd always believed in me. I ignored them all. At the office, Sarah handed me my coffee. Your mother's in the lobby, she said, with your sister, they've been here since 7. I didn't blink. Standard protocol, no special treatment, not even for family. They'll need to request an appointment like everyone else. Already handled. I walked into my corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline I now owned a chunk of. Oh, and Sarah, I added, settling behind my desk. Send a note to HR at Morgan Stanley. During the transition, I want all personnel reviewed strictly on merit. Sarah's smile was razor-sharp. Of course, Mrs. Phoenix, purely on merit. I turned to my laptop, ready to dive into another round of acquisitions. This was where I thrived, not at their dinner table, but here, in the seat they never imagined I'd build for myself. The money, the power, they were satisfying, sure. But the real revenge? Was doing it all while they weren't even looking. My phone buzzed again, a message from Mom. Darling, please, we're your family, we deserve to be part of your success. I typed a response without hesitation. You had 15 years of chances. Then I turned off my phone, opened my laptop, and got back to work. Empires don't build themselves. But I did.